The heat rolled off the Texas plains in shimmering waves, the kind of dry, stubborn heat that clung to your skin even when the wind moved. Dust rose in lazy clouds as cattle bellowed, the sharp scent of scorched hair mingling with the sweet, smoky burn of mesquite wood. Layla Vaughn adjusted the strap of her camera bag, squinting against the unforgiving sun. The branding fire crackled a few feet away, iron rods glowing red, and she lifted her Canon to capture the scene. The blur of hands working in rhythm, the cattle pressed close in the corral, the worn leather gloves, and the sharp bark of a foreman's voice cutting through the chaos. She was here for a spread in frontier traditions, an assignment that had pulled her across state lines and into this forgotten corner of Texas. She thrived in places like this, where culture and grit mixed into something raw, untamed, and worth remembering. City folk usually keep back a little further. A voice drawled behind her. Layla turned, her lens still raised, and froze. The man standing there looked like he'd stepped out of the very history she was documenting, tall and broad-shouldered, the brim of his hat shadowing eyes the color of storm clouds. His skin held a warm bronze cast, his jaw dusted with stubble that caught the light. There was something commanding about him, though he hadn't moved a muscle. "I'm not most city folk," she said, lowering her camera slowly. A faint smirk tugged at his mouth. "No, you're not." She arched a brow, both intrigued and faintly annoyed. "And you'd know that how? Because most wouldn't get this close to the branding pen without flinching." His gaze flicked to her boots, dusted but sturdy, then back to her eyes, or holding their ground when someone calls them on it. Layla swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. Something about the way he looked at her, steady, unhurried, like he could see past the camera and into the person holding it, made the hairs on her arms rise. "I'm Layla Vaughn," she offered finally, forcing composure into her voice. "Photojournalist." His smirk softened into something more genuine. "Jace Weston." He tipped his hat slightly. "This is my family's ranch." Of course it was. The way the other ranch hands deferred to him without him saying a word made sense now. This was his world, and here she was, a stranger stepping through it with a camera like it could shield her from how out of place she felt. "I should probably be thanking you," Layla said, lifting her camera again, partly to hide her nerves. "Your traditions are about to make my editor very happy. You get the shots you need," Jace said, voice low, rough around the edges. "But just so you know." He stepped closer, the faint scent of leather, smoke, and clean sweat surrounding her. "Some stories stick with you longer than you plan." Her heart thudded once hard against her ribs. The camera wavered in her hands. She wanted to ask him what he meant, why his words carried the weight of something more, but a shout from the pen broke the moment. Jace tipped his hat again, like they'd shared some unspoken agreement, and turned back to the work. Layla lowered her camera slowly, the lens capturing nothing now. For the first time since she'd started this assignment, the story she wanted to tell wasn't through her viewfinder. It was the man walking away, disappearing into the dust and firelight. By the time the sun slipped beneath the horizon, the ranch had shifted from labor to celebration. The branding fire was stoked higher, no longer for iron but for warmth and light, casting long shadows across the packed dirt yard. Lanterns swayed from posts, and someone dragged out a set of speakers crackling with country songs that mixed with the sound of boots on gravel. Layla adjusted her lens, snapping photos of laughing faces, dirt-streaked children chasing each other with sparklers, and ranch hands slapping each other's backs as they downed cold bottles of Shiner Bock. The energy was raw, unpolished, exactly the kind of thing her editor would love, and yet she couldn't stop tracking him. Jace Weston. Even now, surrounded by people, he stood out like the firelight bent toward him. He was leaning against the fence, hat tipped back, beer in hand, talking to a couple of older ranchers. Every once in a while he laughed, deep and unguarded, and the sound seemed to roll right through her chest. Layla tried to force her attention back to the job. She caught a candid of a teenage girl trying to teach her younger brother to two-step, then another of the cook piling brisket onto a plate. But the second she lowered her camera, her gaze drifted back. As if sensing it, Jace looked up. Their eyes locked across the yard. It was only a second, 2 at most, but heat surged through her veins like she'd stepped too close to the branding fire again. Jace's mouth curved into the faintest hint of a smile, and Layla had to break the gaze. fiddling with her camera settings like the sudden rush in her chest was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. She knew it. Pretty picture, huh? Layla startled, nearly dropping her camera. One of the ranch hands had sidled up beside her, mid-30s, sunburned skin, friendly enough. He gestured toward the fire, where people had started dancing. Yeah, Layla managed. The light's perfect. The man chuckled, leaning a little too close. I meant the night, the party, small-town Texas charm. She gave him a polite smile, taking a deliberate step back. Right, that too. His grin faltered, but before he could press further, another voice cut through. Low, steady, and immediately familiar. You bothering the lady, Mark? Layla's stomach flipped as Jace appeared at her side, his broad frame casting her in shadow. His tone was easy, but there was a warning in it. Mark chuckled nervously. Just being friendly, Jace. Don't get your hat in a twist. Good, Jace said evenly, his gaze never leaving the man until Mark finally muttered something about needing another beer and walked off. Layla exhaled slowly, realizing she'd been holding her breath. You didn't have to do that, she said, turning to him. Didn't like the look on his face, Jace replied simply. His eyes flicked over hers, then down to her camera. You getting what you came for? Layla nodded, though the truth was her memory card was probably half full of photos of him when he wasn't looking. Yeah, more than enough. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled, someone whooped as a fiddle joined the music, and laughter echoed in the dark. Yet all of it felt distant. You know, Jace said at last, voice quieter now, meant only for her, these nights, they don't last long, but they stay with you. The words echoed what he'd told her earlier, at the pen. Stories that stick longer than you plan. Layla's throat tightened, her pulse quickening under the weight of his gaze. She should have stepped back, she should have made a joke, broken the tension, but she didn't. Instead, she let herself stand there in the firelight, caught in the pull of a man she'd only met hours ago, a man who somehow already felt like a story she wouldn't be able to forget. The fire had burned low by the time the crowd began to thin. The music softened, couples drifting into quieter conversations, the night settling heavy and warm over the ranch. Layla lingered near the edge of the yard, her camera bag slung across her shoulder, though she hadn't lifted it in over an hour. She told herself she was waiting for the perfect shot of the embers against the sky. But when Jace found her there, she knew that wasn't the truth. You slipping out already? He asked, voice low and roughened by the night. She turned, her breath catching just slightly. He stood with his hat in one hand, the firelight catching in his eyes. Up close he looked both untamed and steady, like the land itself. I was thinking about it, Layla admitted. Maybe I'm not ready yet. Something flickered in his expression, relief, maybe, or something deeper. He nodded toward the far pasture, where the land rolled into shadows beneath the stars. Come on, there's something worth seeing. She hesitated only a heartbeat before following. The music faded behind them, replaced by the rustle of grass and the hum of cicadas. When they reached the fence line, the world opened into silence and sky. Thousands of stars scattered overhead, brighter than any city lights she'd ever known. Layla drew in a sharp breath. It's beautiful. Jace leaned against the fence, watching her instead of the sky. Yeah, he said softly, it is. She felt the weight of his gaze before she turned to meet it. The air thickened, her pulse quickening in her throat. Every instinct told her to step back, to protect the careful distance she always kept. But with Jace, distance didn't seem possible. You keep looking at me like that, she whispered, and I won't be able to leave this story behind. His jaw tightened, as though her words struck something raw. Maybe you're not supposed to. The space between them closed in a heartbeat. Jace reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his touch lingering against her cheek. It was a simple gesture, but it unraveled her. The gentleness of it, the way his thumb traced her skin like he'd been waiting his whole life for this one small moment. Layla leaned into his touch before she could stop herself, and then his mouth found hers. The kiss was slow at first, searching, as if neither of them wanted to admit how much they needed it. But the longer it lasted, the deeper it became, heat unfurling in her chest, stealing her breath. His hand slid to the small of her back, pulling her closer, and she gripped the front of his shirt, grounding herself in the strength of him. His shirt bunched in her fists until, without thinking, she tugged it upward. He let her, breaking the kiss just long enough to pull the fabric over his head. Her hands traced the hard lines of muscle beneath, her touch tentative at first, then bolder when his breath caught against her neck. Jace's hands roamed too, over her waist, up her spine, memorizing every curve through the thin fabric of her blouse. When his fingers found the hem, he paused, his eyes searching hers, asking a silent question. She answered by lifting her arms. The blouse slipped away, leaving her bare to the cool night air and the burning warmth of his gaze. Layla. His voice was husky, reverent, like her name alone was something sacred. She kissed him again before he could say more, swallowing the sound, her heart hammering as his hands mapped her skin with slow, deliberate care. Each brush of his fingertips left her breathless, each shift of his body pressing her deeper into the inevitability of him. The night around them faded, until there was only starlight, firelight, and the ragged rhythm of their breathing. It wasn't rushed or careless. It was a surrender, a giving in to what had been building from the moment they'd first locked eyes. When they finally stilled, tangled in each other's arms and flushed from the heat of it all, Layla pressed her forehead to his chest, her breath unsteady. She knew she should feel afraid, vulnerable, exposed. Instead, she felt alive, whole, as though in his arms, beneath this endless Texas sky, she had finally stepped into a story that belonged to her. And deep down, she knew this night would never fade into just another memory. It had already changed everything. 3 months later, Layla Vaughn's boots crunched against the gravel drive of Weston Ranch again. The air was cooler this time, the branding season long past, the landscape quieter in its recovery. She adjusted the strap of her camera bag, trying to still the hum of nerves thrumming through her body. This was supposed to be simple, a follow-up assignment, a chance to expand her photo essay into a full feature on generational ranching, professional, detached. But she knew better. The second her editor confirmed Weston Ranch was on the list, she hadn't been able to think of anything else. She hadn't spoken Jace Weston's name out loud since that night, but it lived beneath her skin all the same. The firelight, his hands on her, the way he'd looked at her afterward, like she was the one thing he hadn't known he'd been missing. Layla had promised herself it was just a memory, sealed away in the dark like the hundreds of undeveloped rolls of film she'd stored over the years. But now, standing in the same dust, hearing the same wind move through the mesquite, she realized the memory had only been sleeping. And then she saw him. Jace was by the barn, his shirt sleeves rolled up, sweat clinging to his neck. He looked the same and different all at once, older somehow, harder in the jaw, more weighted in the shoulders. For a heartbeat, the world tilted, and she was back under the stars, his lips on hers. But the spell broke fast, because she wasn't the only one walking toward him. Welcome to Porchlight Stories. If you are enjoying this tale so far, take a moment to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notification so you do not miss the next upload. Your support encourages us to produce more tales that helps escape the busyness of everyday life, just for a few moments. Now let's get back to this story, because the plot only thickens. A woman, tall and elegant in boots that looked more decorative than practical, moved easily to his side. Her hand slipped into his like it belonged there. Layla's stomach dropped. The woman laughed at something Jace said, then leaned into his shoulder, her polished hair catching the sun. Jace didn't pull away. He didn't even look conflicted. He looked accustomed. Layla? Her head snapped up at the sound of his voice. He'd seen her now, recognition sparking in his eyes, followed by something sharp. Guilt, panic, longing, she couldn't tell. But before he could speak again, the woman turned, smiling with a brightness that didn't reach her eyes. "I don't believe we've met," she said smoothly, offering a hand. "I'm Caroline Hayes, Jace's fiancée." The word hit harder than any branding iron. Fiancée. Layla's breath left her in a rush. She forced her hand into Caroline's, skin prickling, a practiced smile snapping into place. "Layla Vaughn, I'm here for the Frontier Traditions feature." "Of course," Caroline said, squeezing her hand just a little too tightly. "We've heard so much about your work." Layla flicked her eyes to Jace, who was staring at her like he wanted to explain everything. Except Caroline was right there, clinging to his arm like her claim was unshakable. The ground beneath Layla's boots felt unsteady, the past 3 months collapsing under the weight of one simple fact. Whatever had happened between her and Jace was nothing but a night. A mistake, if you asked the world standing before her. She swallowed hard, her throat burning, and raised her camera like a shield. Then I should probably get to work. The lens blurred as her hands trembled. She adjusted the focus, her chest tight, forcing herself to look through the viewfinder instead of at Jace. Because if she looked at him, really looked, she wasn't sure she'd be able to stand. The barn smelled of hay and sun-warmed wood, a comforting scent that usually grounded Layla. Today it only pressed in on her chest. She adjusted the strap of her camera and crouched low, lining up a shot of the herd being driven across the lower pasture. Her lens captured the dust rising, the play of light on the cattle's backs, the sharp silhouette of a rider guiding them in. Perfect, professional. Exactly what her editor would want. But her focus slipped every time Jace's voice cut across the field, low and steady as he gave direction to the ranch hands. 3 months ago, she'd memorized that voice in a darkened bunkhouse. Now it rolled over her like a knife. Need a better angle? Layla jerked at the nearness of the question, nearly toppling her camera. Jace had come up beside her, his shadow spilling across her shot. He was too close, close enough that she could smell the soap on his skin, the faint leather clinging to his shirt. I'm fine, she clipped, steadying her lens. You don't look fine, he said softly. Her jaw tightened. I'm working. The silence stretched between them, heavy and unspoken. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her cheek, the way he wanted to bridge the distance, to explain, but she didn't dare look. If she did, she might remember too much. From behind them, Caroline's voice rang out, lilting and amused. Jace. Sweetheart, could you give me a hand with the ledgers later? Layla flinched at the word sweetheart. She didn't need to turn around to see Caroline watching them, her posture graceful but her eyes sharp. Jace cleared his throat, stepping back like the invisible thread between him and Layla had been yanked taut. Sure thing, he called, his tone too quick, too eager to please. Layla's chest burned, but she refused to let it show. She snapped another photo, the shutter click breaking the quiet like a warning. This wasn't hers. He wasn't hers. Not anymore. Later, at the ranch house, Layla sat on the porch steps reviewing her shots when the screen door creaked. Jace stepped out carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He set one down beside her. I thought you could use a break, he said quietly. She stared at the steaming cup, then up at him. You shouldn't. His brow furrowed. Why not? Because every time you look at me like that, you're forgetting the woman inside who calls you sweetheart. The words slipped out, harsher than she meant, but she couldn't take them back. Jace's jaw worked. He sat beside her anyway, close enough their knees brushed. It's not that simple, Layla. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, to confess how badly she'd missed him. But the porch light spilled across them, and through the open window she could hear Caroline humming in the kitchen, so she swallowed everything down. You're right, she whispered, standing and brushing dust off her jeans. It's not, which is why I'm here for my work. Nothing else. She left him on the steps, his untouched coffee cooling between them. The dinner table stretched long beneath the vaulted ceiling of the Weston ranch house. Family portraits lined the walls, stern men and graceful women staring down from gilded frames, reminders of a legacy Jace had been born to carry. Layla sat near the end, uncomfortably aware of her place as a guest, and of Caroline seated snugly at Jace's side, her hand resting lightly on his forearm as though it belonged there. Layla, Caroline began sweetly, slicing into her steak with delicate precision. Your photos were interesting today, so raw, almost unflattering. Layla lifted her wine glass, masking her expression. The truth isn't always polished. Caroline hummed, smiling as if humoring a child. I suppose that's one way to see it. But people like things they can hang on a wall, not dust and sweat. She turned, brushing a stray speck from Jace's sleeve. Isn't that right, darling? Jace shifted uncomfortably, his fork pausing midway to his mouth. He didn't answer. Layla's stomach twisted. This wasn't her fight, not really. But Caroline's tone wasn't about art, it was about drawing battle lines. Later, as the table cleared and the ranch hands drifted out, Layla gathered her camera bag. She was almost free when Caroline's voice stopped her in the hall. "Layla." She turned. Caroline stood by the staircase, the dim light sharpening her perfect features. The sweetness from dinner was gone, replaced by steel. "I think it's admirable what you do," Caroline said smoothly. "Traveling, taking pictures, living on your own terms. But Jace, he belongs here. His family, this land. It's not something you can just photograph and move on from." Layla's throat went dry. "I'm not trying to—" "Oh, I know." Caroline cut in gently, her smile never reaching her eyes. "But people talk, and the last thing I want is for rumors to make things uncomfortable, for you or for him." The implication curled like smoke between them. Caroline descended the stairs gracefully, leaving Layla rooted in place, her pulse hammering. She knew a warning when she heard one. That night, in her room, Layla sat cross-legged on the bed with her camera. She scrolled through the day's photos, her fingers tightening on the lens. The images were sharp, beautiful, alive, everything Caroline had dismissed. But Layla couldn't shake her words. Uncomfortable. Rumors. He belongs here. Her chest ached, because Caroline wasn't wrong about one thing. Jace did belong here. The question was, did Layla have any place in this picture at all? Downstairs, she heard Jace's low voice carrying through the walls. Then Caroline's laughter. The sound sliced her deeper than she wanted to admit. The smell of smoke and singed hide hung heavy in the air, mingling with the low bawl of calves and the barked orders of ranch hands. Sparks snapped in the branding pit, the orange glow painting long shadows across the dirt. Layla crouched low with her camera, capturing everything: the red-hot irons, the blur of muscle and movement, the raw ritual of legacy preserved in flame. It was gritty, primal, unpolished, exactly the kind of truth she craved. Her lens lingered when it shouldn't have, on Jace. His shirt clung to his back, darkened with sweat as he worked a rope with smooth efficiency, muscles rippling under the strain. Firelight carved him in bronze and shadow, and for one stolen heartbeat, he looked like something ancient, untouchable. She lowered the camera, pulse hammering. "Careful there," came a voice behind her. One of the ranch hands grinning. "Those sparks'll catch your hair if you're not watching." Layla managed a tight smile, but her eyes flicked instinctively to Jace. He was watching her now, his rope stilled, the iron glow reflecting in his eyes. For a moment, the whole dusty chaos seemed to fade, leaving just the two of them tethered by something unseen. Caroline's voice cut through the night like a whip. "Jace, over here, darling. This one's strong." The spell broke. Jace turned, jaw tight, and reached for the next calf. Layla forced herself back to her work. Hours later, the herd was finished, the last embers glowing low. Laughter and music drifted from the bunkhouse, where the after-party had begun. Layla slipped away from the noise, her camera bag heavy on her shoulder. She found herself by the corral. The stars spilled bright across the Texas sky. It should have been peaceful. Instead, it gnawed at her. The ache of wanting something she had no right to want. The creak of boots on dirt made her stiffen. Jace couldn't stand the crowd either. His voice was low, roughened by smoke and weariness. She kept her gaze on the fence. "I'm here to work, not to celebrate." A pause. Then, "You got some good shots tonight." Her throat tightened. "I wasn't photographing you." "Didn't say you were." The silence that followed was thick, thrumming with everything they weren't saying. Layla's hands gripped a wooden rail until her knuckles whitened. "You shouldn't be out here," she whispered finally. "Not with me." Jace stepped closer until the heat of him brushed her shoulder. "And yet, here we are." She turned, and for one reckless second they were too close. The smoke on his skin, the fire still flickering in his eyes, the memory of a night neither of them could erase. But before the space between them could collapse, a shrill laugh carried from the bunkhouse. Caroline's. Layla jerked back, breath catching. Jace's hand twitched like he wanted to stop her, but he didn't. And that hesitation, That single damning pause was enough to remind her exactly why she couldn't let herself fall again. She grabbed her back and walked away, leaving him in the shadows of the dying fire. The night was still humming with leftover music and laughter when Layla packed her gear. She wanted out of the bunkhouse, out of the eyes that seemed to measure her, out of the orbit of Jace Weston. But fate had other ideas. He caught her just outside the barn, leaning against the doorframe like he'd been waiting. Hat in hand, hair damp from a hurried wash, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "You were gonna leave without saying a word?" His voice was soft, but it carried an edge. Layla stiffened. "You shouldn't care if I do." He pushed off the wall, closing the distance. "Don't do that. Don't act like tonight didn't what?" Her laugh was brittle. "Didn't remind me that you belonged to someone else? That whatever we had was just a mistake you don't have the guts to admit to?" Jace's jaw flexed. "You think I don't feel this? You think it's easy, Layla?" Her chest tightened, but anger burned hotter. "What's hard about it, Jace? You've got your fiancée inside, planning a life that makes sense. You've got land, family, a legacy. And me, I'm just the outsider you let into your bed one night. That's all I'll ever be, isn't it?" His silence was worse than a denial. Her throat closed. "Say something. Tell me I'm wrong." He opened his mouth, then closed it, eyes tortured but words trapped. And that was enough. Tears stung, but she refused to let them fall. She shouldered her camera bag and stepped back. "That's what I thought." "Layla." He reached for her arm. She flinched away like his touch burned. "Don't." The night swallowed her footsteps as she walked off, leaving him standing in the dust, hat dangling useless in his hand, the weight of his silence pressing heavier than chains. The morning sun broke over the ranch, golden light spilling across the fields. But inside the Weston home, tension simmered hotter than the branding fire. Layla kept to herself, reviewing photos on the porch, while whispers drifted through the house. Something was off. The air was charged, brittle, as though everyone knew a storm was coming. It broke by mid-afternoon. Jace's mother, Evelyn, stormed into the barn, a letter clutched in her fist. Her face was pale, lips pressed tight. "Jace," she snapped, "is this true?" Confused, he took the crumpled page. A forged note suggesting Jace had been sneaking around with ranch hands behind Caroline's back. Caroline followed on Evelyn's heels, all wide eyes and wounded innocence. "I didn't want to believe it," Caroline said softly, wringing her hands for show. "But the signs were there. The late nights, the way he—" "That's enough," Jace cut in, his voice sharp. He looked down at the letter, then back at her. "Where did you even get this?" Caroline faltered, just for a moment, but it was enough. From the doorway, one of the hands stepped forward. "Begging your pardon, Mr. Weston, but I saw Miss Caroline near the office yesterday, near the typewriter, alone." The barn went quiet. Jace's eyes hardened, the last thread of patience snapping. "You forged this." His voice was low, dangerous. Caroline's mask slipped. Her jaw tightened, and the sweetness bled out of her tone. "What did you expect me to do, Jace? Just sit back while she slithered her way into your life? While you threw away everything your family built for some traveling photographer?" Layla froze where she stood by the stalls. Her name hadn't been said, but the venom made it clear enough. Evelyn's hand went to her mouth. The betrayal in her eyes wasn't aimed at Jace, but at Caroline. "Get out," Jace said, voice like stone. Caroline's eyes widened. "What?" "You heard me." He stepped closer, fury radiating from him. "We're done. Whatever deal our families made, whatever plan was set, it ends now. You don't lie about me. You don't go after Layla. You don't belong here." Her face crumpled, then twisted, pride rearing one last time. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "Not half as much as I'd regret marrying you." The words cracked through the barn like a whip. Caroline spun on her heel, skirts snapping, and stormed out into the sunlight. For a long moment, silence reigned. Dust motes swirled in the shafts of light, the only movement. Then Jace lifted his gaze, and across the barn, his eyes locked on Layla's. The look said everything, freedom but also devastation. Because while Caroline was gone, Layla was still slipping away. Layla had her bags packed. Her camera equipment was carefully stowed, her duffel zipped and waiting by the door. She'd even scribbled a note to leave behind, polite, detached, professional, exactly the way she wished she felt. But her chest ached. Every photo she'd taken over the last week flickered in her mind. The fire's glow, the raw strength of the cattle drive, the candid moments of the Weston family, and, always, Jace, his silhouette against the smoke, his eyes catching hers in the shadows, the man she loved and the man she had no place claiming. She slung her bag over her shoulder, ready to slip out before anyone noticed. Layla. The sound of his voice stopped her cold. Jace stood in the doorway, hat in hand, eyes storm dark and raw. He looked nothing like the proud rancher she'd met that first night. This was a man stripped bare, tired, desperate, but determined. "You're leaving," he said. Not a question. She lifted her chin. "There's nothing left for me here." He stepped forward, slow but certain. "Don't say that." "Why not?" Her voice cracked. "You had every chance to choose me, Jace, and you didn't. You let me walk away, twice." His jaw tightened. He closed the space between them until she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. "You're right. I was a coward. I thought I could make everyone happy. My family, Caroline, the whole damn town, and still keep you in the corners of my heart where no one could touch you." His voice dropped ragged. "But I can't. I don't want to." Her breath hitched, tears stinging. "Jace, no." He reached for her, his hand trembling as it cupped her cheek. "I'm done lying to myself. You're the fire I can't put out, Layla. You always have been." Her eyes fluttered shut at the warmth of his touch. For a moment she wanted to push him away, to cling to the walls she'd built. But the walls had cracks, and through them his words poured like light. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I don't fit here. And Caroline, she's right about one thing. This world is yours, not mine." "And I'll make it ours," he said fiercely. "You don't have to fit into anything, Layla. You just have to stay." Her throat closed, emotion thick and heavy, and before she could think better of it, she reached up, her fingers curling into his shirt, pulling him down to her. Their mouths collided, not with the heat of anger this time, but with the desperate, aching relief of two souls finding home again. The kiss deepened, breaths mingling, hands roaming. His sliding to the small of her back, hers tangling in his hair. Her bag slipped from her shoulder, forgotten. His hat hit the floor with a soft thud. Clothes loosened, fell away in unhurried layers, each touch an apology, each kiss a vow. They stumbled back toward the bed, laughter breaking through their tears as they held on like they'd never let go again. It wasn't wild like their first night. It was slower, gentler, but no less intense. A joining not just of bodies but of broken pieces mending, of fire tempered into something enduring. When it was over, they lay tangled in the sheets, her head on his chest, his hand brushing lazy circles on her arm. For the first time in months, the silence between them wasn't heavy, it was full. "We'll figure it out," Jace murmured into her hair. "I swear it, Layla. Whatever it takes." Her lips curved faintly against his skin. "You'd better." And though the storm wasn't over, for the first time, she believed him. The Weston family gathered in the great room, the air thick with expectation. The fire crackled low in the hearth, but the warmth did nothing to ease the chill threading through Layla's spine. She stood near the doorway, her camera bag clutched like a shield. She hadn't wanted to be here, hadn't wanted to see the storm Jace was about to walk into, but he'd asked her, "Be by my side," and she couldn't refuse. Evelyn Weston, her posture as straight as the portraits lining the walls, was the first to speak. "Jace, I hope you understand the weight of what you've done." Jace stood tall, hat in hand, jaw set. "I do." "You've humiliated this family," she continued, her voice sharp, "breaking an engagement that would have united two powerful ranches. Over what? Over a woman who doesn't belong here?" The words sliced. Layla's stomach tightened, but she forced her face to stay composed. Jace's eyes darkened. Don't talk about her like that. Evelyn's gaze flicked to Layla, then back. She's an outsider. What does she know about this land, this legacy? What she knows, Jace said, his voice steady but low with conviction, is how to see it, really see it. She's shown me this ranch, our life, through her lens in ways I never looked before. She knows me better than anyone, and she belongs with me. The silence that followed was heavy, stunned. Evelyn's face faltered, just for a breath, before she drew herself up again. And what of the Westons' future? Of the deals we've built? Of everything your father worked for? Jace's grip tightened on his hat. Then I'll build it my way. No more deals made in back rooms. No more bartering people like cattle. If that means I have to fight twice as hard, then I will. But I won't sacrifice the woman I love to do it. Layla's heart lurched. The words were spoken loud, clear, in front of everyone. For her. A murmur rippled through the room. Some of the hands exchanged glances. Evelyn's lips pressed tight, but she didn't answer. Finally, Jace stepped back, his hand reaching for Layla's. If you can't accept her, then you don't accept me. The shock of his palm against hers steadied her knees. Together, they turned toward the door. Evelyn's voice stopped him, softer this time, not sharp, but weighted. He paused, shoulders tense. Her eyes lingered on Layla. Something unreadable passed over her face. Regret, fear, maybe even reluctant respect. This isn't the end of the conversation. No, Jace said, his voice gentler now. But it's the start of the right one. And with that, he led Layla out into the open air, their hands clasped like a promise. The following evening, the night was restless. The ranch seemed to hum with tension, the way the air shifts before a storm. Layla sat on the porch steps, her camera beside her, staring out at the horizon where the faint glow of lanterns bobbed in the distance. Something felt wrong. Moments later, Jace stormed out of the barn, his shirt streaked with dust, his expression grim. It's Caroline. She's been stirring trouble with the McCrearys again. They set fire to the north pasture. Layla shot to her feet, her chest tightening. The herd. We're already moving them, but it's spreading faster than we can handle. Without hesitation, she grabbed her camera bag, instinct, as if documenting mattered, then abandoned it, realizing this wasn't about photographs, it was about survival. The sky lit up orange, smoke billowing across the fields as the fire clawed toward the fences. Ranch hands shouted, horses whinnied in panic. The roar of flames mixed with the crack of wood snapping, a terrible symphony of destruction. Jace vaulted onto his horse, then turned back to her. Stay by me. Don't go running off. I'm not leaving you, she said firmly, climbing up behind him. They rode hard into the chaos. Jace shouted orders, his voice carrying through the smoke. Cut the fence, drive him south. Men moved like shadows, blades flashing as they freed the cattle, guiding them towards safety. Ash swirled around them, stinging Layla's eyes, but she clung to Jace's waist, trusting his instincts. He handled the reins with fierce determination, a man born to command in fire and fury. When a burning beam collapsed near the corral, Layla shouted, Jace! He leapt down without hesitation, hacking at the fallen wood to clear a path for the trapped horses. Layla scrambled after him, coughing as smoke filled her lungs. Together they pulled the gate free, releasing the terrified animals. For a heartbeat, as the herd thundered past, Layla caught Jace's eyes. Fierce, resolute, alive. This is who he is, and I'm exactly where I belong. By dawn, the fire was beaten back. The land bore scars, but the ranch still stood. Exhausted, blackened with soot, the crew gathered in silence. Caroline arrived in a sleek car, her expression wide-eyed with false innocence. I heard about the fire. Terrible, just terrible. Jace strode toward her, rage simmering beneath his calm. Save it. I know you had a hand in this. You wanted to break me, to scare me back into your plan. But you underestimated one thing. Caroline arched a brow. And what's that? He reached for Layla's hand, pulling her forward. His voice rang clear across the scorched yard, that I don't stand alone anymore. Caroline's smirk faltered. For once, she had no words. Layla's chest swelled with pride. It wasn't just defiance, it was love, loud, unashamed, undeniable. As the crew looked on, soot-streaked and weary but united, Jace's mother stepped forward. Evelyn's gaze lingered on the pair, her face unreadable. Then, softly, she said, "Your father would have wanted the ranch in the hands of someone who fights this way. Maybe I was wrong." Jace blinked, caught off guard. Evelyn didn't say more, but the shift was real, a crack in the wall that had divided them. Later, as the first light of morning painted the horizon, Jace and Layla stood side by side, the smell of smoke still in the air. "You sure about this life?" he asked quietly. Layla looked at the land, scarred but still standing, then at him. "I've never been surer of anything." And when he kissed her, tired, rough, but full of promise, it wasn't just survival they tasted, it was the beginning of forever. Spring settled over the Weston ranch like a benediction, the pastures greening after winter rains, wildflowers scattering purple and gold across the fields. The scars of the fire still showed in blackened earth along the north pasture, but new shoots had already begun to push through. Life had a way of returning, stubborn, beautiful, unstoppable. Layla lifted her camera, snapping a shot of a lone mare grazing against the horizon. She lowered it, smiling to herself. It wasn't for a magazine spread this time. It was just for her, to remember the peace she'd found here, the peace she never thought she'd deserve. The screen door creaked, and Jace stepped out onto the porch, his shirt sleeves rolled up, hair still damp from the morning shower. He leaned against the post, watching her like she was the most natural part of the land. "You're up early," he teased. "Blame the light," she said, lifting her camera in explanation. "Can't waste a sunrise like this." He came down the steps, boots crunching in the gravel, and slipped an arm around her waist. "Sunrise looks better from here," he murmured against her temple. She laughed softly, resting her head on his chest. The rhythm of his heartbeat was steady, grounding, as if it had been waiting for hers all along. In the weeks since the fire, things had shifted. The Weston family, once so guarded, had begun to thaw toward her. Evelyn no longer looked at her like an outsider. Instead, she often sat with Layla at supper, asking questions about her travels, her work, even her childhood. Caroline had faded into silence, her power stripped once Jace exposed her schemes. The ranching families had found new footing without her bargains, and though the scars of betrayal lingered, they no longer dictated the Westons' future. And Jace had become more than the rugged cowboy she first photographed under firelight. He was her anchor, her partner, her fiercest protector and her gentlest companion. As the morning stretched before them, Jace turned her toward him, brushing his thumb across her cheek. "You know," he said, his voice low and certain, "you've changed everything." Layla arched a brow. "Good or bad?" "The kind of change that makes a man fight harder, dream bigger, love wilder." He paused, eyes holding hers. "I don't want this to just be chapters we look back on. I want the whole book with you." Her throat tightened, emotion catching her off guard. "You mean—" He didn't let her finish. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple silver band, worn but strong, like the land itself. "Marry me, Layla Vaughn. Not for the ranch, not for anyone else, just for us. Just because I can't imagine breathing without you." Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded, laughter breaking through her joy. "Yes, Jace. 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, sealing it with a kiss that carried the sweetness of sunrise and the fire of every night they'd shared. Behind them, the ranch stirred to life, cattle lowing, workers calling out across the yard, birds rising from the trees. It was messy, loud, imperfect, but it was theirs. And as Layla stood wrapped in Jace's arms, she knew the truth. She hadn't just come to Texas to document branding traditions. She'd been branded herself, not by fire, not by fear, but by love that burned hotter and healed deeper than anything she'd ever known. Forever marked, forever his. Thank you for listening to The Branding Fire, a story of passion, betrayal, and love that endures. If you want more unforgettable romances, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's coming next. The fire doesn't end here. Click the next story now to join us for more romances that heal and inspire. See you in the next video.